Robots Radio presents...
Today's chat is brought to you by, well, all of your support. Through the patronage you provide the Focus Fire chat team through Podbean's crowdfunding, we are able to provide you with the weekly podcast as well as the website and other aspects of Focus Fire chat. If you have any interest in becoming a patron of the FFC, please be sure to visit our website and click on the support link. Even a single dollar helps, and for those of you who are already patrons, thank you again for your generosity.
You may have heard the whispers of guardians gathering in the shadows, exploring the mysteries of this world and the worlds which surround us. We are all in search of truth. Sometimes we need to focus that search, focus that fire. And so we come together. Welcome to Focused Fire Chat.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on August 14th, 2020 over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. As always, I want to give a big shout out to our live chat here with us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us once again. This week's episodes are going to be focused around exploring the lore of Io. This particular episode will serve as what we have come to call the intro session of the week's exploration. Before we go any further, however, let's run through a quick introduction of the two people that we have on the show with us. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86.
You kind of just referred to yourself.
Yeah, I have person. No idea. I was reading that and I was like, in the back of my head, I hear Green going, I love how you always make fun of how it's just multiple people when it's just two. I'm like, I should change it. This is why I don't go off script most times, because it just doesn't go well.
I also like how now that we're doing face cams for these recordings, I could see the wheels turning because you always look up and to the left when you're trying to think about something.
I'm like, oh no. The words don't match what I'm trying to say.
Yes, it's okay. Yes, it's me. It's a Green. So, nothing's fancy. Just green.
Just green.
Just
better than most of us, so... really, we don't have a guest, so this is like just gonna be quiet for 20 quiet for 20 minutes.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
I guess really quick, just like special announcements or just a reminder really is, just be sure to check out the Lore Network site. I know a lot of I've been trying to keep up with the weekly lore roundups, so we do podcast roundups and YouTube roundups every week. Predominantly, they are right now mostly Destiny lore. If you guys have any suggestions for other game lore that you want to see us kind of dive into or show to kind of help get that out there, please let us know. We either through email, through the contact site or contact page on the site. Just let us know how we're doing. If you have any feedback on the weekly lore roundup posts, also please let us know. We do those, like I said, we do those twice a week. And then also just a real quick reminder, if you haven't already, please give us a review over on iTunes. The reason why is because that helps us get kind of spread out over on iTunes and other podcast things. Helps us bump up in those charts and just kind of helps make us more noticeable across communities as well. As far as other announcements, Green, I think you are on the second episode of DLA.
By the time this releases, though, I think we'll probably be closer to 4 or 5 by the time this releases out on the normal.
Yes. Yeah, because it'll be... yeah. Mm-hmm.
But currently, as we're recording this, there are 2 episodes of Destiny Lore Audiophile out there of the Singular Exeget and Black Armory Papers are both out now. And then starting next week, I'm going to release Maricina in groups of 30 minutes. So it's going really well. So if you guys haven't seen it or heard it or seen it on Twitter, it is Destiny Lore Audiophile, which is on iTunes and Podbean. I'm working on Spotify. I have to have 5 episodes out before I can put anything on Spotify. But it is out there and available. And audiophile is more of like the medical-ish kind of audiophile. It's not with an F, it's with a PH, if you guys are having trouble finding it. If not, head up Discord. I've been putting it in there. Blue's also linked it in Discord, and I've been pushing it out on Twitter as much as possible. And it's just lore readings. It's not any commentary. And I will for the first couple of weeks, it'll be me being the primary reader. And then I actually have a lot of community members who have submitted episodes for the podcast, and those will start coming out here in about 4 weeks, in about a month or so.
And we also will link that. I've been putting those now in the weekly lore roundup as well. So if you subscribe to the post over on thelorenetwork.com, that will be every Wednesday because it's in the podcast update. And really on Green's, the audiophile, be sure to leave her a review, because kind of to peel back. We're going to do this next week too, by the way, or we're going to record it next week. But one of the things behind the scenes for podcasts that iTunes does is the first 30 days that a podcast is up on its feed, they hyper focus on the reviews that they get. So if we can get Green and the audiophile good reviews and a good number of reviews, that will actually really boost that as well. And so it just
viewing.
Yeah. So you can get, I think it's new and upcoming, I think is the category that you can get put into. And if you get put into that via the iTunes logarithm, that will actually put the podcast up on like iTunes front page, which is a huge deal.
Yeah. It would be awesome. And I would appreciate it. It's a lot of hard work, but it's a lot of fun at the same time. So come and check us out. But since we don't have a guest this week, our guest for this week is actually graciously moved into the slot for next week because he had a little bit of a mix-up going on. But we're going to dive into world lore on Io, which I imagine is going to be quite the expansive, if Blue's show notes are any indication, expansive episodes. It's 11 pages long, guys. I did some of the show notes for like this one, and I came back, it was like 5 pages, which is fairly like normal, and it doubled.
I was typing last night and I was like, I should probably go to the next show now.
Yeah.
Listen, between the science check and all the stuff that there's a lot of information about, like, even just Io, like, which kind of is like one of the smaller areas, I guess, arguably. It's a really fascinating thing. We were kind of talking about this before show, but the cool thing with Io, since it was part of the base game, there's a whole breadth of information, or the breadth of sources that places such as Mars, which is next week, Mars doesn't have the same breadth of sources that I can pull from. And so, like, the one of the things that I was telling Green before we started recording was I really like the Prima game guides for games, and it's a sadness for me when we have games that are ever evolving, because what happens with Prima is they only release those game guides for the very first iteration of the game. Any of the expansions, they usually they will never release like a standalone book. They'll release, if you sign up on their website, they'll put like articles and stuff that kind of break it down, different like campaign, walkthroughs and all that. But that's really not why I like the game guides. I like the game guides because they actually have like some really cool little nuggets as far as the story go. Elder Scrolls, they do the same thing. Halo, they do the same thing. All these games that have very expansive stories, there's some really cool little things. The other thing that the game guide does is it actually does a really good job of capturing the named enemies that you will fight throughout various parts of the campaign. So you don't have to be super aware of, or hyper aware of what you're like going up against. You can focus on just playing the game because the game guide has that information kind of in text. And growing up, the game guides were basically, for those of us who grew up before the internet was as big as it is today, the game guides were the internet. Like that was basically our Ishtar.
What was the most used game guide you ever used?
Legend of Zelda.
Mine pretty easily.
Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was not for the story because of that godforsaken water temple.
Really?
Oh, water temple can just go.
Wow. I wore out my Oblivion game guide.
But anyways, so there's a lot of like nuggets that I was able to include in this one on IO because IO was actually part of the base game of Destiny. Mars was not. So sadly, I don't have like the little kind of. I always kind of read them as like DMG or Dungeon Master guides. They're referred to as DMGs. As a DMG's guide to the different areas because, like, for example, for the introduction of Io, the Primate Game Guide says it's a partially terraformed planetoid orbiting Jupiter. Io was abandoned by the Traveler, though Ikora Rey and the Warlock Guardians consider the area around the Echo Mesa Mountain to be sacred. Currently, this region has seen recent Cabal activity, though the Red Legion appears to be actively fleeing the world rather than salvaging it. The reason may involve some concerning anomalies detected by Asher Mir. Although this area has examples of impressive Vex architecture, the telltale signs of taken activity are present throughout this place. Which, I'm like, it's just, and you know, obviously it's changed since, you know, this was like, what, 5 years ago? So a lot has happened in the game world, but as far as like introducing a place, that was really good. And you compare it to like the Bungie website, which I found out today they had taken all these pages down, which makes me sad. But from the Bungie website, they used to have these little blurbs on different planets. And Bungie's website said, Io was the last place visited by the Traveler and the site of great interest to both humanity and the timeless Vex machines. The Red Legion, too, now seek to unravel the secrets and power of this place, gouging at the surface, seeking to uncover new sources of power to aid in their quest to dominate our worlds. It is up to you to protect this place and preserve its great legacy. So, I mean, kind of close. I personally like Prima's, like, I was telling Green, it does this like really kind of cool blend of like meta information with in-game presentation, which you'll start seeing when we start to get into some of the other little areas, because it's like, hey, this is, you know, the Lost Oasis, and it actually connects to these three places, which as a player, you know, you need to pay attention to. But it does it in a way that's like I don't know. It's just a really cool little way that they do that.
Yeah, it's just, it's nice to have games and guides outside of it. Actually, the one that I would say most recent, that it's not technically a Prima game or anything like that. It's the cookbook. The cookbook has a ton of like little lore snippets about Eva, about the city, the civilians, all sorts of tiny things that you wouldn't necessarily get from in-game content or even outside of game content, except for in the book. Cookbook is so good. Also, recipes, they are amazing. Julie and I are working our way through it slowly, though not as slowly as we probably should. We had Le Monarch like 3 days in a row, not gonna lie.
Is that the Monte Carlo-esque sandwich?
Sort of. It's a croque monsieur.
Okay.
Which is, yeah. It's kind of like a Monte Carlo.
It reminds me, like I saw it and I was like, that's a nope, it's not. Like, but it definitely
basically a ham sandwich with gravy.
Okay. Instead of jam.
Anyway.
So, basically within the game lore, Io has been at multiple points described as being in the midst of being terraformed by the Traveler during the last days of the Golden Age. So it was in process. It had not been fully terraformed by it. So that process was actually interrupted by the arrival of the darkness. We saw this with the Last Days of Kraken Mare lore book. That was when the Traveler abandoned the moon, moving to Earth for reasons that are still not really fully known. So in the current game world, Io is a space that is still charged with the energy of the Traveler. And you can see this with the terrain being littered with all these massive fossilized figures of unknown organisms which resemble things such as trilobites, ammonites, and other dinosaurs from Earth. And it's a unique geography because, again, it was in the process of being terraformed. It was never actually fully finished. So like all this stuff is still like raw energy, which is where you get the Red Legion coming to kind of mine
it.
Yeah, it's like mine, I think would be the best way to do that. During gameplay, the primary contact for Guardians on the moon is a Jinsim scribe by the name of Asher Mir. Although, currently, during the season of arrivals, Eris Morn has also been noted as having arrived to examine the cradle, where a mysterious tree has begun to grow. I don't know, was there anything other than that before I jump into some science facts about it?
Ikora was there during the original campaign. That's where she fled to, was Io. But beyond that, there really haven't been any other vendors or anybody of major note there besides enemies.
Rasputin, technically.
Yeah, the bunker. That doesn't make any sense. I'm going to be on that high horse until somebody from Bungie explains it. I just, the train...
The subway is just the funniest. It's just the funniest thing.
It's like, I'm fine with the bunker surprisingly being there. It's the subway that I have a problem with. I just love the fact that
where that bunker popped up, I was like, really? That's okay. Like, all right. Same as the moon bunker. I was like, it's a very big door.
The moon one, yeah.
At least with the moon one, though, they actually had like they had the ground like erupted or whatever. The Io one was like in the middle of the road. I was like,
yeah.
We failed our perception check every time. But just like real quick, some real science, because hey, guess what? Io is actually a real place. It's also known as Jupiter 1. It is the innermost and third largest of the 4 Galilean moons. Those moons are Europa, Ganymede, Callisto, and Io. We'll get to why they're called the Galilean moons in just a second. I bet you can guess why. It is the 4th largest moon in the system, with the highest density and the lowest amount of water of any currently known astronomical object within our system. It is named after the mythological figure of Io, who was a mortal lover of Zeus, I know, hold your surprise, and a former priestess of Hera, which is actually where the story took a very tragic turn, by Simon Marius in 1614. However, the moon itself was discovered by Galileo Galilei on January 8th, 1610, along with the other 3 moons of the Galilean moons. Even though it has the lowest amount of water, it is one of the most geologically active objects within our solar system, with 400 plus active volcanoes on its surface. The moon's surface is covered in over 100 mountains, some that reach higher than Earth's Mount Everest, and it is mostly extensive plains coated in sulfur and sulfur dioxide frost, which will give you an idea of the temperature on Io. While most satellites in the system are composed of ice, Io is primarily silicate rock surrounding a core of molten iron or iron sulfate. There are even lakes on the moon made of molten silicate lava in areas, and the area of the activity of the moon is caused by the tidal heating created internally by the friction generated by the gravitational pull of Jupiter and the other Galilean satellites, specifically the larger 2, Europa and Ganymede. As far as like a day, an Ionian day is an equivalent to 1.77 Terran days, and the moon is tidally locked with Jupiter. So what that means is, whereas normally a moon would spin, it's same as like the Earth spins, rotates, and when it rotates around the sun, because of the proximity to Jupiter, it does not actually spin. Every point of the process of it rotating around Jupiter, the same side of the moon will always face Jupiter. The interesting thing about that is that means that gravity is really, really low. It is literally 0.183 of Terran gravity. So it is, you would basically be able to fly on Io. Well, you would still fall, but it would be very, very slow.
You'd be falling like a warlock, gracefully falling. But the thing with Io in particular, if you think about how large Jupiter is, and it still has a quote-unquote day, that means that Io is traveling around Jupiter quite quickly in order to make its rotation.
Yeah, because, I mean, a day is... Yeah, because the day would be... It would travel around Jupiter in 2 Earth days, which is... I mean, that is a pretty... It's a pretty good pace. It does have an atmosphere. It's very, very thin, and it is actually about 90% sulfur dioxide. So you'd need a breathing apparatus. And the composition of like the constant volcanism, the intense radiation because of the thin atmosphere, basically translates into Io is really not capable of supporting life as we know it. Though pretty much every source will say. That is not to say that it couldn't harbor some form of life, but that life would be extremely alien to our understanding of what life exists as.
Interestingly enough, though, because of the density of the planet or the moon itself, it does kind of lend itself to having a giant Vex.
Yes, well, that
construction in there, like it could handle it.
That, and also the fact that it is predominantly silicate.
Yeah,
which I found really kind of interesting because, like, they have it's basically plains of this like silicate rock. But then there's also a lot of areas where there are, like I was saying, molten silicate lava, which is just a fascinating concept.
Yep. I think we should take a quick break to let our first ad go through for Robots Radio, or actually, depending on it, I have convinced a few of the podcasts within the Lore Network to send us ads soon. Mm-hmm. Those of you who are in the Lore Network who are listening at the moment, I'm looking at you to get those to me sooner rather than later. I'm calling you out on the show. Please do so. Anyway, getting back to the ad, and we'll be right back.
Hey friends, this is Robots, the creator of the Robots Radio podcast network and host of the two original shows on the network, the Fallout Lorecast and the Elder Scrolls Lorecast. These two shows have rocketed up the iTunes charts. They both together have over 150 five-star reviews in only a couple of months, with bite-sized episodes that take you step by step through the background of the games and the game worlds. They're thought-provoking, well-produced, and a lot of fun. I recommend you go check them out at robotsradio.net or on any podcast reader, podcatcher, whatever you use, iTunes, Spotify. Again, that's the Fallout Lorecast and the Elder Scrolls Lorecast, available everywhere.
And we're back with more on IO. We're going to talk about specifically, I think now more about the types of lore that we've gotten from IO, about IO, or about things that have happened in that vicinity. The primary books that we have actually, I think, just came out this season.
Yeah.
Both Singular Exeget and...
The only books that we have on IO, we have entries, but I don't think we've ever had any books. Right. So, sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've never had any books related to Asher so heavily, right? So we have Singular Exeget.
There was Stolen Intelligence.
Duress and Egress.
There was Stolen Intelligence, but no, that was secondary connection. Sorry. He was mentioned in reference to Eris, not supposedly.
Correct. But beyond that, there's not any books that IO is really, really tied to. We have more missions and, like he's mentioned, lore entries for different types of weapons and whatnot and armor that takes place there than anything else. Singular Exeget has a really, how would you describe the IO role in that one particular?
In the Singular Exeget? Mostly, I mean, like IO, if we're going to characterize IO, it would be really as the backdrop, I would say, with that one. Duress and Egress, it's even more so because Duress and Egress is an amazing book that everyone should read just for the sake of the redemption of so many hated characters in the Destiny lore, especially Brother Vance and Asher Mir. But like, Duress and Egress also take place on all the locations that are being sunset, whereas Singular Exeget kind of really focuses on Eris's journey to and kind of her research at the Cradle. So like IO is prevalent in the sense that, you know, it's the environment in which the story is taking place. You get some really cool, like, I liked it. I think Seth did a really good job with that one, because you see like this side of Eris that we surprisingly haven't seen before. She's like she's doing like experimental cooking, which is really funny. She gets pissed at a Titan because she won't bring her a pineapple. And
okay, the pineapple thing. The story with the pineapple in Singular Exeget is so funny because you find out that the reason why this Titan's even up close to her is because they're basically spying on her.
So it's like, it's the question of, it goes back to the age-old question, are you paranoid if that paranoia is correct? is.
Right? But the whole reason she wants a pineapple is because she found a recipe for fried rice with pineapple. Which sounds delicious. Like a coconut rice with pineapple sounds amazing. Like, I would eat that. But it becomes a secondary mission in the entire book. One of the funny things about this season with each week's mission is you actually get a snippet from almost every single card in this book. Mm-hmm. Every time you activate the seed at the end of the mission, the interference mission, you're getting a tiny bit from that card. But it never mentions the pineapple, though those are some of the best actual spots in the card because they're so funny.
I love both of these books for very, very different reasons. Yeah, Pid, it's not paranoia if they are actually out to get you.
Well, they weren't out to get her. They were just spying and trying to figure out stuff. Anyway.
Oh,
Duress and Egress is another funny one.
Yeah.
And Eris makes a showing there, too.
Yes. But Asher, like, especially the second entry, where Asher's like, you know what? I'm going to go into the Pyramidium. And it's like, oh, wow.
That's the third one.
Or is that the third one?
That's the third one.
Yeah.
So this first one, he shoots the pyramid and like determines. He determines that the item or the rocket.
Isn't that the one where he's like, "Oh, you come and sit on my doorstep and do something this interesting"?
He did old grandpa on the front lawn bit in the first entry. Second entry is his really awkward almost date with Eris.
That's right.
Yeah. He brings out, I think it's like a whiskey. It's a type of liqueur, like golden liqueur. And he has two glasses with him. And he sets out only one of them. And it's like, Asher, you big baby, just do it. You're both weird enough it would work in my mind. But secondary ship. Most people are shipping Eris and Drifter.
Oh my gosh.
I think it'd be funny. They're technically quote unquote cousins in their mind, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I just love the entry. The entry to that one is Ashermere cursed his way across Dio.
Yeah. Well, and then the third entry you mentioned where he goes into the Pyramidion and then raises his hands to the lake.
Yep.
The improbable lake that we never see.
Inverted lake that is upside down. And he brings it down, is what it says, I think, if I remember. He reached with both and he brought the lake down. I'm like, wait, what? Not to mention that he just strolls through the Pyramidion. He
kills hundreds and hundreds of Vex. Yeah.
Destroys them all.
Yeah. Asher is more of a vamp than we've ever given him credit for.
Yeah. The entry that stands out to me is he destroyed the first 100 Vex, then the second. A Minotaur roared into being before him, and he crushed its Radiolorian heart in his metal fist. He climbed forward over their clawing limbs. He slipped into the cooling row of their dead fluid. So don't get Grandpa mad. Because...
Yeah. Asher's.
Oh yeah, he uses the corpses of the Vex to trigger the Vex plates. I forgot about that part.
Oh,
because he stands on the gates and he says he was prepared. He piled their broken corpses on the plates and then continued inside.
I love it.
Oh my god,
I love it. So other lore entries that we have for IO actually have more to do with the different gear that we've gotten, as well as adventures and missions that we've talked about. You listed a few of them in here, but I don't know if I necessarily want to go through them until the advanced episode because we've got
the Vespulazer was the one that I still don't understand what the hell is going on with that one.
Yeah, that's the Sparrow.
Mm-hmm. It looks really cool.
It's partially related to Rasputin, too.
Yes.
So, but, let's see. I'll tell you something about IO. No, really, you won't find this anywhere. I remember once my partner and I were lost for a week straight in a canyon on IO. We weren't eyeing one another like turkey legs or anything, but it was close. We were running out of rations. Then we saw the loose Vespulsar come in and disappear over the canyon walls. We knew it was by those stripes. They make it look like some kind of dangerous insect. We knew it'd be hours of climbing, but we hurried towards it immediately. Look it up. It's just it's a Sparrow entry. I don't think there's anything super major besides the fact that
it's just
Guardians
like a weird entry. Like, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be fair. I'm also trying to figure out like what insect it's trying to be, because, you know, that is a unique word to Destiny.
I don't know. Maybe it's some sort of beetle, like racing beetle.
Yeah, I was not able to find a real connection to the Vespulacer. So, but yeah, that's the one that always kind of is like, what is going on in this?
Yeah. We had the figures on Io. We mentioned Asher and Eris, as well as Ikora. Ikora's kind of only ever there for the missions. She does help talk through some of the missions, doesn't she? Like, besides the original vanilla. I'm trying to remember if she actually had a say in
Eris or
the mission.
Sorry, Eris or Ikora?
Ikora.
Ikora is actually the source of a lot of the adventures and the world quest that we'll get into in the advanced session. She is the one who kind of kicks off the what was it? The Dynasty quest. It's referred to as King's Shadow in the game guide, but Dynasty is actually called out as being started by Ikora recognizing something, and then Asher jumps in, but Ikora is actually the catalyst for that. And then
primary lead.
There is Unexpected Guest and I think Road Rage were the two adventures that she was really big in. And then a lot of the planetary patrols that you have. There's some really cool little tidbits about like the hidden and the way that Ikora actually really trusts your guardian. There's a lot of comments about that are within the patrol mission dialogue that gets played. But as far as like during missions, I know with campaign missions it was Sacrilege and Fury. Sacrilege is when we actually find Ikora, and then Fury is when we basically, like, it's the one that's right after Sacrilege. So she is prominent in those two, but not like she's not
a primary vendor or anything.
No, she's not she is definitely still I don't think, other than the cutscenes, we even interact with her on IO.
She's basically the Zavala for that location,
and
though.
Just like
Zavala runs
Nessus.
all the strikes and stuff like that, and Ikora runs it for IO.
Yeah, yep. It's a trade-off with the strikes usually between Ikora or Asher. I don't think any other, which is like some
it's
of
conceivable.
I think he has said impossible 12 times. Impossible.
Yeah. Oh, I think my favorite Ikora line is Asher feels safe to say those things because he is on IO
and I
am not. It's like, oh. Anyway, so we have Asher, Ikora, and Eris. Eris being new this season on IO. And then we have some of the bosses in the Lost Sectors, Keldron, Keeler, Pandrock, Pillar of Nothing, and Ruined Mind. And then there's also a couple of other bosses that show up relating to Kuria.
Yes. Real quick, Black Flag corrected me. Thanks, Black Flag. Festering Core Strike is Zavala and Eris, because that's the one with Savathûn's Reach being connected to IO.
Gotcha. Locations on IO, where we have couple different primary locations. We have the Cradle, which is the most important one that we're seeing this season. That's the one where when you first spawn in with Ikora during the very the Sacrilege mission, where she's standing on the side, she's looking out towards the Cradle. It's also where the giant pyramid ship at the moment. Then you have Echo Mesa, which is the one, I would say, is it the top side or bottom side of IO on the map? I can't remember.
I think it's the top side, because Lost Oasis is part of Echo Mesa. Echo Mesa is like the whole thing. So like Echo Mesa is like that whole, all of that. The landing zones within Echo Mesa are Lost Oasis, Giant Scar, and the Rupture. So Lost Oasis is the one that I believe is right across... Or no, Lost Oasis is in the top. The Rupture is right across from the Grove of Ulantan. And then Giant Scar is the
Pyramidion area?
No. Well, is it the Pyramidion area or is it the giant drill? I think it's the giant drill. I can't remember that one, but yes,
Well,
there's the Echo Mesa is like the whole map is called Echo Mesa,
right?
And then there's different components. Is the cradle, is that the place that looks like where the traveler was sitting in the skybox? Okay, which is a really cool skybox. I love that particular skybox.
Yeah. So then we get into the Lost Oasis. The Lost Oasis is easily the largest sector on the moon. It contains a good deal of tiny caves, alcoves to find, taken foes scattered across the open mesa plateaus, and half a dozen ancient and gigantic trees now frozen like stone. The two biggest have an underground tunnel linking them. There are roads around the perimeter and a river bisecting the general area. This is also a hub where you're maneuvering to all other sectors on Io. So I like Lost Oasis because it has a lot of like tiny areas that are very rarely used, but they often will have things like scannables in there, or there'll be like a lost the golden chest, one of those planetary chests. Those will be in some of those different small areas, so it takes a little longer to find them, I would say, on Io than others. I know that Savathûn's eyes have shown up in a lot of those same little caves and alcoves too.
Yeah, each of the sections on Io had 5. It's been a while since I ran through these. I think there was 10. Oh gosh, man, what was it? I can't remember. But I think each like section on Io had at least 5, because then the Whisper had 3 or 4. I can't remember. Like I said, it's been a while since I had to pop all those. Black Flag, correct me again. Lost Oasis is across from Ulantan, and Rupture is where Asher is. Giant Scar is where the Cabal equipment is located. So I flipped those, as I do. But actually, real quick before you go on, that little paragraph that you just read, that's from the Primate Game Guide. That's what I was talking about. I love how that like ending is like, this is also the hub that you, when you're maneuvering to all their sectors in Io. I'm like, that's really cool. Like, I like how they they buried game information into the summary of that piece.
Yep. The Grove of Ulantan, you want to talk about something that has a lot more lore to it than what it initially...
But only if we whisper
kind of seems. Well, not even just with the Whisper mission. Like, isn't there an adventure that goes into that one as well?
Yeah,
where you're fighting the two sides? Yeah,
there's been quite a bit actually kind of flowing through the Grove of Ulantan as a lost sector. Like, it was, I remember when everyone first found it, I remember everyone was like, what is this? Because it was a nod to the fact that whenever when Titans die, or when they face their final death, they're buried in the wall, which is a creepy picture. But when warlocks die, they are brought to Io because it is a sacred place for them. And so we have within the lore scattered throughout, there's actually references to the burial of Ulantan and how like the various different characters kind of were like, I think it was Cade who even made a comment about he showed up for it. He didn't really want to be there, but he was either meeting somebody or he had something else that he was doing, but like he showed up for it. So because Io is a sacred place for the warlock guardians, whenever one of them falls, they usually there's a tendency for them to be brought and put to rest, if you will, on the moon. It seems like it would also be around the area of the cradle, because that is the Mecca, I guess, if you're going to equate it to an actual place. It would be that would be the equivalent. It's like, this is the place that you journey to commune with the traveler or whatever.
It was with Albios.
Oh, Albios, yes. Albios and his weird lanterns.
So after the Grove of Ulantan, which has lots of different missions and events going through it, whether it's the Whisper mission that Blue initially found recently, or the missions where you're fighting and you're seeing the two different sides, the Taken, I believe it's the Cabal boss and the Vex boss, both there. Beyond that, we get into the Spine Burrows, a secondary sector that is accessed on the eastern perimeter of Lost Oasis. Spine Burrows is once a tranquil cavern with some interesting ancient fossilized remains. And honestly, Io is just full of these little fossils all over the place. There are a few trees that are dead. The only trees that seem alive are the ones that show up in the mission when you're getting your next super. Back in the, what was it, Forsaken, when we got the third super?
Oh, yeah.
You did a mission
Yep.
on there where you had the light tree, essentially, from the Traveler show up in a few different locations.
It looked a lot like a tree with silver wings. What?
Sort of, except for this one also had a lot of darkness with it.
Well, then the thing that was really kind of weird about that one was the light pieces that you were picking up were feathers.
Yeah.
So that was always kind of the thing that I loved.
There's the Terra Base Charon, which is where the Cabal are on that area. The Wraith Mines, which is also kind of within that area with the Cabal and the Terra Base. Then you get to the Rupture. I'm going to kind of speed through this a little bit. So if there are a few of these locations you want to talk about more, because you wrote in all the Prima guides. All of them. Things in here.
All of them.
All the guides.
All the guides.
All the guides. The Rupture is a landing zone, a sprawling plateau of interconnecting dirt roads, rock outcroppings, and other interesting ancient formations like skeletal remains and fossilized walls, is nothing compared to a massive Vex pyramid that takes up the entire western perimeter of this large sector. So this is the Ashermere location. The pyramid has 2 usually inaccessible sectors you can enter during certain missions, and a large Vex presence altered by the encroaching Taken. In the midst of all of this is Ashermere, a no-nonsense scientist and vendor for this world. Expect major battles between Vex and Taken forces as you search through Vex architecture and a natural mesa cave near the eastern perimeter. So, the Rupture has Rasputin's Bunker, Pyramidion. Currently, the Contact event is alternating between Io and Titan. This is one of the locations that it is in as well. There are 2 lost sectors in this zone, Aphix Conduit and the Sanctum of Bones. I believe the Sanctum of Bones is the one directly across from Asher, whereas the Conduit is tucked behind kind of the Pyramidion. If you're going directly across from the Pyramidion, across the little structure, it's tucked in the wall a little ways. Beyond that, Blue... Do you want to take over for Giant Scar and the evacuation zones?
So Giant Scar is the last landing zone on Io. Described as the remains of a Cabal mining operation exist in this sector, formerly a natural rock formation known as Giant Scar. Bisecting the 2 boulder-laden valley floors is a long mining operations center with pedestrian and vehicular access to and from each main area. The majority of the battling occurs at the drill site, a roughly circular arena-like valley with a massive central mining drill. Around the perimeter are various exits to small caves and other sectors. The 2 sectors that are really noticeable here are Excavation Site 2 and then the Warmind Vault JYS2. Excavation Site 2 is accessed via the exterior entrance at the drill site in Giant Scar, and this small interior set of storage rooms and computer operations room must be exited the same way you come in. It features a series of square-shaped chambers, each with a half a dozen Taken targets to engage. Come for combat, leave after finding the 3 scannable objects. And then the Warmind Vault it's actually an inaccessible sector that is only entered during the campaign mission Fury. I think there were a couple other times following that. This was from the Prima guide. But it is the hidden, this is where I kind of perked up a little bit. It is the hidden Vex lair known as the Warmind Vault JYS2, now completely overrun by the Taken. This leads to a mainframe arena where you battle one of the toughest foes on this planetoid, a gigantic Taken boss known as Modular Upsilon, and his energy chaining partner, Modular Sigma. I kind of perked up because they were like, it's a hidden Vex lair. I was like, wait, what?
Well, it's the Vex that are within it. Yeah. When we're battling, it's taken over now by Taken, but there are Vex within that vault, and in a slightly different location that's also still part of the Warmind network is when we're doing the Arecibo mission. We're dealing with the Vex primarily in there as well.
Yes.
But
yeah, I think that's what chat's talking about right now.
Yeah. Map for IO. I believe the only map for Crucible is Javelin 4, which is an excellent map. One of my favorite maps. But beyond that, we're going to get into the planetary armor sets and the weapons, but I want to take a quick break before we jump into that. So we'll see you on the other side of the ad.
Hey, I'm Tom.
And I'm Stuart.
And we're from the Dungeons & Dragons Lorecast.
We talk about all things connected to D&D lore.
And we're on the Robots Radio Network. So if you're into Dungeons & Dragons or you're into lore, then come check us out. You can find us on any podcatcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you get podcasts.
Roll more dice.
That's the Dungeons & Dragons Lorecast.
And we're back with the planetary sets as well as the weapon sets and armor sets. Jensen Knight set. One of the best looking sets, in my opinion, for the hunters as far as planetary sets. Mm-hmm. Definitely going to miss that one. Mm-hmm. I don't even remember what the ones for Warlock and Titan looked like, because
I know the Jensen Knight for the Titan looked pretty good too. I don't remember the Warlock, but they did re-release them as Shadowkeep armor.
That's true.
So
that's true.
Kind of are still relevant.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty.
They're pretty. I love the chest and arm like aesthetics they have going with it.
Do we kind of want to talk about what a Jensen Knight is for anybody who may not necessarily know?
Do we know what a Jensen Knight is?
We know what a Jensen Scribe is. You can probably...
Because even that term is a little confusing because there's a Warlock group of Jensen Scribes, but then there's also the Awoken Jensen Scribes.
Yes. Which is what that's what I'm interpreting it as the scientist-based ones from the Awoken storyline, which would make sense with the Asher Mir connection since he is a Jensen Scribe. Do you think that the Awoken were the Jensen Scribes that set up the Warlock versions? Just a little theory thrown out there.
I would be curious to see if the other. Yeah, I think that's where I think we're thinking the same thing. I would be curious to see if the Jensen Scribe Warlocks are all Awoken. It would make a lot of sense to me. I would find that interesting because technically none of them would remember being Jensen Scribes. But that being said, they could also be. You could explain that as like a similar Anna Bray situation where they were resurrected with a particular piece of equipment. There was the oh gosh, what was it? It was one of the cooler Warlock bonds from Destiny 1. It actually was one of the 3D ones that would change color based off the time that you were wearing it in the game, and it was it was something pendulum. But it was the first mention of the Jensen Scribes that we had in the game, and it was basically something that they were all seeking. And so that was kind of a nod that maybe that was something that one of them woke up with, and that was the whole start of that. But
I can see that.
I take it as the Jensen Knight is the martial equivalent to the Jensen Scribe. So that whereas the Jensen Scribe is going to be the researcher, the intellect, the Jensen Knight are maybe like the guards of those scribes. This is kind of how that's how I've always kind of had my own headcanon around it.
Interesting thing with the Jensen Knight armor set is they're all Asher Mir quotes. Mm-hmm. And Asher is get off my lawn-esque. I have no use for mawkish sentimentality. What I do need is an assistant who stays alive as often as possible.
The legs are the best one.
Congratulations on finding your true calling in life. You have been an adequate assistant. Have you ever considered that the Traveler might be just as chaotic and arbitrary as everything else? Jensen armor. Let's hope it does you more good than it did me. Remember, the universe is a chaotic system. This fippery won't protect you from the continuum.
So the arms make me think also that this is where Asher used to have this set of armor. A set of armor. This isn't his armor. But when he went into the Pyramidion with the two hunters where he lost his arm, you know, I kind of get the sense that he was wearing a suit of Jensen armor.
Yeah. The weapons that are through here, I'm just going to kind of name off the weapons that were important.
The base ones I didn't really see anything a lot. They tend to all be poisonous, but that's also because a lot of them are viced weapons. Or is it vice? Viced? I can't remember how you pronounce it. Viced. So that was, which is one of their thematic points. So. Yeah.
Valakadin, which was actually an auto rifle that we got in the beta for this game way back when. It is the auto rifle. You have the Rattler, which is a sidearm. Baligant, Unspoken Promise, Widow's Bite, which I think is probably one of the more prominent ones. Tarantula, also a fairly prominent. Blue Shift, rocket launcher. Behringer's Memory, which is the grenade launcher. Death Adder, submachine gun. Some of these have come back recently into prominence because of the way that they're cycling weapons now. But I think the two that most people are probably most familiar with that are related to IO are both the Whisper of the Worm, the sniper rifle that you get through doing the Whispered Mission dungeon. It's not quite a dungeon. It kind of is a dungeon.
I think it's
Ruinous Effigy.
I think they consider it a dungeon, but it's like a light dungeon.
It's like a strike. But anyway, IO's currency going away soon. Phase glass looks like crystals that are imbued with the traveler's light, almost.
Not the same as dusk light, but very similar. Phase glass is usually like it reminds me of like ferns, it's like a frond. It's a multiple faceted one, whereas your dusk light is going to be like the big, like amethyst
singular
looking. Yeah, it looks like an amethyst, big chunky thing. Phase glass, we actually learned a little bit about phase glass from the Dawning. It is material that can be used to create temperature regulating stitching and enables the dynamic resizing of bonded solids. It is because Zavala likes doing stuff with yarn and sewing, and this is actually one of the things that we had to collect during the Dawning to craft a present for multiple individuals because of the component or because of the abilities that the material has. The other thing with it is there is a variant of phase glass called Radiant Phase Glass, which we used to forge Izanagi's Burden during the Season of the Forge, that was acquired from the Pyramidion. There was something about, I can't remember exactly the component, but it was basically that idea of the dynamic resizing of bonded solids. Something about the Radiant Phase Glass, there was something that had been done to it that allowed the sniper rifle to be forged correctly. And don't forget the most important currency, the IO token.
The tokens?
Because we all love inflated
that's probably
currencies.
The one thing that I'm most excited about with this update that's
getting rid of planetary tokens.
Just getting rid of all the tokens. Tokens are going away, so are those materials.
I still miss my sapphire wire, but you know.
Okay.
The main ghost shell really is just the IO shell. Okay. It's a season 1 shell, common. It's a green shell. Really, every single planet had one of these planetary shells. As far as jump ships and sparrows, the predominant one that stood out was the Vesper Laser, which we already talked about. There was one that I'm remembering that I didn't write down, and I'm kicking myself for it because there was one that actually comments on Asher's fear of leaving IO, and I'll have to look for it real quick, but that it is I think it was an exotic jump ship that was talking about that. As far as shaders, the shaders are Echoes of IO, which comes in a variant of Worn and air quote new, and then also Flowers of IO, which also come in a variant of Worn. Those shaders tend to be predominantly a yellow coloring, if I remember that one correctly.
Yeah, sand Sand shades is how I've interpreted it.
I'm not a huge fan of them, but there are some twists that you can put on them. Emblems really predominantly from season 1 and season 2. You had Traveler's Flight, Holy Ground, and Ballet Lover, Ballet Lover was a really cool one. It's got a diamond made out of circles, and it's just I actually really like how that one is. The Lost Sector variants that you have there are Traveler's Departure, Taken Resurgence, Ignition Unsparked, Echo Mesa, and Asher's Asylum. So there's a few tidbits in the names themselves. The only ones that I was able to find on the Nightfalls were from the Pyramidion, and these are just really fun. So the Pyramidion has variations as well. The first one is an inscrutable amygdaloid hygienostate, and then the second one is Operation Intrepid, and then the last one is Spiraling into the Infinite. So yes, an inscrutable amygdaloid hygienostate. Asher Mirror's One-Way Ticket. That was the ship. Thanks, Dino.
Yeah. Asher uses, I would call them quarter cents words. Mm-hmm. It's not a penny word, it's a quarter. Hygienostate.
An hygienostate is the quantum mechanical state corresponding to an eigenvalue of a wave equation, which is like, it's one of those words that has a definition that doesn't make anything clearer.
Nope.
It's like, oh, okay, so what's an eigenostate? Oh, it has something to do with eigenvalue. What's an eigenvalue? It's got something to do with an eigenostate.
Science. God. Circular science. We have ghost scans. Mm-hmm. 28 of them.
Tiny hydras.
Yes, tiny hydras, which is terrifying. That gate.
We were talking about that in chat earlier.
I was like, what the?
That mental image that popped in my head was like, God. Nope.
Yeah, one of my first major projects in D2, if you remember, it was collecting those ghost scans, and that was the most terrifying one out of all of them, was the gate that's in the cave that you find that talks about the tiny Vex coming through, the hydras that are, just reminds me of the servitors, like the fallen servitors that are the Russian nesting dolls versions.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I ran into those in the EAZ. I was like, oh no, you.
Yeah, that guy. Lots of mentions of the Exo Stranger on IO, which is kind of fun. Talk about triggering a bunch of people who said, when they said that they weren't going to talk about the Exo Stranger, and then D2 comes out and there's these, all the scannables on that one. Those are mostly in the Lost Oasis. I think the funny one there is the one that confirms that ghosts are capable of hearing beyond what the humans or guardians can hear, which is like,
I mean, it makes sense in a way, because they have
sensors
that are able to be more fine-tuned. I mean, that does make sense, but yeah, it was...
Spine Burrows had a few had a few scannables in it. Mentions that the Vex are the radiolorian fluid. We actually had confirmation on that the Vex are not the machine aspect of it. It's the Vex milk, so to speak, is the actual Vex. And then Carving of a Line from As I Walked Out One Evening by W.H. Auden. That one I'm going to let you talk about, because that's the poem.
Go on, and I will jump in when I remember which one it was.
Okay. Terabase Charon. Discovery of an access point which has been modified to allow exos, which is the access point within the Terabase Charon. That is the Cabal base. And then it allows the exos to actually interface within the next Vex network. It also mentions a connection to the Vault of Glass. And there is a resonant signal which translates into Savathûn. First mention of Savathûn in the D2 universe. D2 context of the Destiny universe. The Wraith Mines. mentions that the blights are akin to transmitters, allowing something whisper to take in IO, as well as something actively scanning on the other side of the portals. So you had a couple different like blights show up on IO that are scannables that have this mention of resonance either being transmitted in or out, or there's like the whisperings of the worm god's names. Ir, Ur, Yor, Yul, Zol, all of them. And you get to the rupture. The rupture mentions light radiating from the ruins of a Vex gate, indicating a powerful impression having been made upon the Vex, as in possibly Osiris, or Kabir, or Saint, possibly. It also mentions that Taken will not be without a leader for long, so more hints at Savathûn, possibly. And discusses that the Vex as a whole race are dedicated to one thing, a conversion process of some sort. And then there's only, 3 more?
Mm-hmm. As far as the Walden, or was it Walden? Yeah, Auden poem. It's the line is, someone's carved something here. It says, "Oh, let time not deceive you. You cannot conquer time." That is from the As I Walked Out in One Evening, as Green had mentioned, but the full, I guess, stanza would be, "But all the clocks in the city began to whir and chime. Oh, let not time deceive you, you cannot conquer time. In the burrows of the nightmare where justice naked is, time watches from the shadow and coughs when you would kiss." So it's a really pretty poem, actually. But the stanza before that also says, "The years shall run like rabbits, for in my arms I hold the flower of the ages and the first love of the world." So it's just, oh let not time deceive you, you cannot conquer time. When you're talking about the Vex, it's kind of a connection there, that the Vex jump through time, supposedly.
Giant Scar. The location there has a few scannables, but it mentions Vex gates as transportation portals connecting Mercury, Venus, and Mars, which would be nice to go back to Venus soon. Mm-hmm. Excavation site number 2 has taken blights which serve as communication portals to the Ascendant Realm, which is also whispering back another mentioning of the blights. So there's a few different locations with that. Not a ton of extra information there, just more of hints of there is a new bad guy coming, which we know at this point. Beyond that, though, I think that's pretty huge amount of information for the intro session, and we have hit our 20-minute mark for the next segment. Would you like to wrap this episode up and switch over to the advanced episode?
I think that would be. I think in the advanced episode or advanced session, we'll jump into obviously the missions and the quests and adventures. There are some really good ones.
Arecibo.
Yeah, there's some really good ones in there. So, shoutouts, really just, again, if you guys get a chance, please be sure to check out thelorenetwork.com. Let us know thoughts on the site. If there's stuff that you would like to see, if there's stuff that we could do better that we already are doing, just let us know. And then also just, leave a review over on iTunes. It helps us out. And also be sure to leave Destiny Lore Audiophile a review, since it is a brand new podcast over on iTunes. The more reviews that we can help get, the better that logarithm is going to pick up on it. So we're just wanting to try to boost that as much as possible.
Please and thank you. You guys are awesome. As far as shout outs for this week, there's shout out to coffee and YouTube videos that are tutorials and all sorts of different things this week. Like people who are content creating, not as a profession, but just to help people out. I think that's probably going to be my shout out this week, because Julie has learned how to fix a lot of things in the house, and I have learned how to help her fix a lot of things in the house via YouTube videos that people randomly put up. So if you've ever thought about being a content creator of any sort, whether or not it's just like, hey, I want to put something out there because I'm good at this one thing, do it, because there's going to be idiots like me who need it. Just, you're saving my butt. YouTube University is kind of amazing on that front. Also, speaking of learning how to do something, Blue and I are actually putting together a behind the scenes episode for you guys about how to make your own podcast, or how we basically make the podcast, and what we go through in the creation and editing and all of that kind of stuff. coming up. So I think we're recording it this next week.
Yes.
Within the next week. So look forward to that in your feeds. Blue, do you have any shout outs besides the announcements?
No, not really. As always, thank you for your time. And until next time, remember, with wisdom we conquer, stand strong, stand tall, and keep exploring. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusedFireChat. Links to all our episode archives can be found at www.thelorenetwork.com. Please be sure to email us at focusedfirechat@gmail.com with any comments and or questions for the team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. So until next time, focus your fire and may your light shine bright.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.